Imagine this. Within the stone walls of a medieval convent, a noble-born nun turns hallowed ground into a nightmare. Behind prayers muttered by candlelight, children wept silently. Devotion was twisting into torture. This is not a ghost story. It is a dark cut from history, and its end concludes with bones hidden beneath the floor. History is silent, but its shadows hold many secrets. In this video, we will bring them to light. Like and subscribe so you don't miss it. Elizabeth of Palatinet was born into the privileged world of a noble family, swathed in velvet, protected, and meticulously raised. She grew up surrounded by silver crosses, holy men, and religious ceremonies. The world for her was a blend of piety and power. But there was an oddity from childhood. Her toys were not dolls or ribbons, but small wooden figures. She would wrap them in cloth and pierce them with pins. When her nanny died suddenly, her eyes were wide with a chilling lack of horror. People whispered, but no one spoke up. At the age of 15, Elizabeth entered the St. Agidia Convent. At 17, she became the spiritual leader of the convent, praised for her discipline and divine passion. Noble families sent their daughters to be educated under her guidance, expecting spiritual mentorship. But what they did not know was that Elizabeth believed that true devotion could only be found through pain, and she was eager to teach it. Her first victim was a girl named Lotte. She had spoken during evening prayers, and the price was steep. Elizabeth took her to a cold stone chamber. No one knew exactly what happened behind the door. Only a muffled scream echoed through the halls. When Lotte returned, her eyes looked at no one. Her walk was uneven, and she never smiled again. Under Elizabeth's bed was a small iron box. Inside, it contained thorns, leather ropes, and a Bible scribbled in red ink. She called them instruments of purification. Her punishments became increasingly perverse. She starved the girls for days, then made them memorize texts until they collapsed from exhaustion. If a line was forgotten, Elizabeth's thin, cold hands would grip their throats with superhuman strength. At night, the convent corridors were filled with silent sobs. But no one in the town questioned it. Some even praised her. There was a little harshness in the house of God. They did not see the bruises under the girls' clothing, nor did they notice the metallic scent in the prayer rooms. One winter night, a student named Maria tried to escape. She was caught at the edge of the forest, barefoot, bloody, and her nightgown torn. Elizabeth declared she must be rebaptized. The ritual was brutal. Icy water, naked skin. Maria was unconscious for days. When she awoke, she whispered a single word, "Burnt angel." When spring arrived, Father Matthias, a traveling priest, visited the convent. He noticed the girls' rigid greetings, their anxious glances. He asked questions, but the answers seemed rehearsed, like lines from a play. Only a mute orphan named Elsa found the courage and handed him a small drawing. It was sketched in charcoal, but the image was clear, a woman's face twisted in fury, standing over a pit full of fire. Matthias began to watch. One evening, he saw Elizabeth vanish into the catacombs beneath the convent. She stayed there for hours. One night, he quietly followed. What he discovered would haunt him forever. The rooms beneath the convent were carved from stone, lit by candlelight. Chains hung from the walls, and blood, there was too much blood. In a corner stood a kneeler studded with nails. On it lay a worn Bible, its pages wet and illegible. But next to it was something more terrifying, a ledger. Every page bore children's names. Some were crossed out, others marked with strange symbols. All were students. All had vanished. Matthias fled before dawn, but could not forget. For weeks, he traveled to the villages, speaking to the families. The names matched, the faces did not return. Parents had received vague letters. Illness, sudden death. But no one had seen a body. No one had dared to question. Elizabeth's boldness only grew at St. Agidia. She declared a new holy period, a time of reckoning. God demands purification, she announced. The students were deprived of warmth and comfort, forced to kneel on cold stone for hours, forbidden to speak, prevented from dreaming. Those who disobeyed did not suffer alone. Elizabeth made sure others watched. The next victim was Helena, a baron's daughter. Her sin was mispronouncing a Latin prayer. That night, she was dragged to the basement. The other girls heard only two things: low-toned prayers and the grating sound of metal scraping stone. Days later, Helena returned, her hands tightly bandaged. She never wrote again. The other nuns feared Elizabeth, but there was something they feared more. What would happen if they spoke? A nun named Sister Agnes dared and expressed her suspicions in the confession booth. The next morning, she was found floating face down in the garden well, her eyes staring up at the sky. Elizabeth dismissed it as a tragic fall. No one questioned her. Father Matthias returned, this time under the guise of an official inspection. His invitation was forged. Elizabeth greeted him with a strange smile. "We are always grateful for guidance," she said. Her voice was sweet, her eyes like winter. That night, Matthias found the chapel doors locked. He bribed a servant and descended once more into the catacombs. What he found was more horrifying than his previous discovery. There was a newly cleaned gravestone, but the scent was still sharply acrid. Burned cloths, singed hair. In the corner, fresh writing scratched into the wall, Dominic Liberanos. God save us. The ledger was gone, but a larger, older journal lay on the stone shelf. Matthias snatched it and fled. Elizabeth noticed its absence before morning. Her rage was silent but certain. That night, she gathered the girls and initiated a midnight ritual. "We will purify the memory of the heretics," she stated. Mute Elsa was forced to kneel on shards of glass. In the capital, Matthias pleaded for help, but the church hesitated. Elizabeth's family was influential. Many monasteries were affiliated with them. Yet, one bishop agreed to investigate, and soldiers were dispatched. Late in the afternoon, news of the inquiry reached the convent. That night, Elizabeth performed her ritual, which she called the final consecration. The next morning, black smoke rose from the rear chapel. Soldiers broke down the doors. The convent was silent, the dormitories empty, but a metallic scent drew them to the catacombs beneath the altar. There they found them, almost a dozen girls chained, pale, and starving. Some whispered verses, some merely stared blankly. In one chamber, there was a blood-covered throne-like chair and drawings of angels with bladed wings on the walls. Elizabeth had vanished. No trace, no carriage marks, no witnesses. Only the Bible lay open on the altar, wax-stained and soaked with blood. Only one verse was underlined: "I will show you the way." The girls who survived, even amid the fire, were quickly brought before the bishop. Most could not speak. Those who could told of punishments masked as worship: nails under fingernails for impure thoughts, heads submerged in water during midnight confessions. Their bodies told the truth. Elsa's drawings confirmed it. One picture was particularly striking. Elizabeth, over a pit, arms raised, blood pouring from her palms like holy water. Below her, faceless figures reached out, their mouths open in silent screams. This was not a fantasy. It was a memory. The church could no longer remain silent. A decree was issued. Elizabeth was declared a heretic and a fugitive. Her family called it blasphemy. They claimed she had been framed by jealous priests. But fear spread among the nobility. If a nun could be a monster, who else was hidden behind sacred robes? Rumors spread quickly. Some said Elizabeth had fled to France, disguised as a grieving widow. Some claimed she had joined a cult deep in the Black Forest. A few believed she had been killed by her own followers. None were confirmed. Months later, a hunter strayed far into the old mining paths. He found a half-buried, hidden chapel among the soil and vines. Inside, it was dark and damp. Decaying tapestries clung to the stones. Candles had long since extinguished. The dim light around the altar played with the shadows, and a body clad in black robes lay on the floor. No face remained, only bone and putrefied flesh. But in a faded hand, a rosary bearing the Palatinet crest was tightly held. Written on the wall in dry blood were 3 Latin words: sanguis, lux, redemptio. Blood, light, redemption. Church authorities secretly buried the body. No name, no rites, just a stone marker. But the whispers did not cease. Villagers on the edge of the forest still claimed to hear hymns among the trees at night. Children told stories of a woman in gray robes watching from the shadows, her veil billowing in the still air. Even as time passed, the darkness remained. The Baron's daughter, Helena, never recovered. She roamed her manor, mumbling prayers backward, drawing angels with broken wings on every wall she found. The mute orphan, Elsa, grew up as the woman of silence. But one night, she vanished. No note, no trace, only a fresh page torn from Elizabeth's old ledger remained. Father Matthias, the man who exposed all these terrible secrets, rose in the church hierarchy but never returned to St. Agidia. At his death, his hands were clenched over a cross so tightly it cut his palms. His last words were whispered through cracked lips. "We thought she served God, but she transformed herself into something else." Centuries passed. Finally, restoration teams were sent to the ruins of St. Agidia. Deep in the catacombs, they discovered a sealed chamber, unmarked on any map. Inside, there was only one object, a small statue of the Virgin Mary. Her eyes were gouged out, and carved into the stone beneath were the words, "Do not protect us from evil. Let's be reborn through it." This inscription sent shivers down the spine of every historian there. It was not from known sacred texts. Some thought it was a lost teaching written by Elizabeth. Others believed it marked a darker secret, the beginning of a hidden cult. It was called the Gray Sisterhood. The theory suggested an underground movement that emerged after Elizabeth's disappearance, consisting of women who saw pain as the key to spiritual ascension. Their motto, "Suffering purifies, silence consecrates." Strange events began to increase in Europe. Nuns disappearing from convents, bizarre marks on children, a chapel collapsed, revealing a hidden basement full of chains. Carved beneath the altar, Elizabeth, but concrete proof never emerged. Elizabeth remained a legend, a warning whispered to young girls. If you do not obey, the nun in gray robes will come. For the families of the vanished, she was not a legend. She was a wound that still bled. History refused to heal. In 1813, a German doctor, Wilhelm Kai, found a journal believed to belong to Elizabeth. The journal detailed rituals, fasts, flagellations, and visions of angels encircled by fire. He took the journal to the university for authentication. 3 days later, he was found dead, his eyes gouged out just like the statue of the Virgin Mary. The journal disappeared. Only one page remained, stained with iron gall ink and torn. It read, "Through pain, we become innocent." Today, the ruins of St. Agidia still stand. Locals do not enter. Tourists come, but most do not stay after sunset. Some say they hear faint prayers beneath their feet. Others claim to see someone in the bell tower, her dress swaying in the still air. Elizabeth's story is still debated among modern theologians. Was she insane, demonic, or a woman who used faith to cloak her sadism? Perhaps it was all of the above. Or perhaps she had discovered a secret older than the Holy Scriptures. The terrifying truth: those who look too deeply into her story meet strange fates. When they get too close, something answers. The final page left by Elsa before she vanished was examined under ultraviolet light. Beneath the visible ink were faint symbols. One, an inverted cross tangled with thorns. The other, a child's face weeping in blood. Some historians suggest that Elizabeth never intended to escape justice. Her disappearance was not a flight, but a conscious transformation, a ritual, a sacrifice, a door, not a grave. Notes forgotten in the archives of the 17th century nuns support this view. In an unsigned confession, she writes, "We did not follow Elizabeth. She was following something that whispered in the dark and wore the face of God." The document was burned shortly after being read aloud. Yet, some objects believed to belong to Elizabeth continue to surface. A rosary said to induce vivid hallucinations, Latin prayers that bleed when touched. Most are fakes, but not all. One historian was convinced he found a copy of Elizabeth's personal Bible and began to read it obsessively. He was eventually found dead, face down in a bathtub full of holy water. His hands were clasped in prayer. In 2019, paranormal investigators entered the ruins of St. Agidia. They live-streamed for 6 hours. The last 30 minutes were corrupted. When corrected, only a single frame remained, a blurry figure of a nun standing directly behind the cameraman. The church rarely speaks of Elizabeth. Her file is silently labeled a doctrinal anomaly, but it remains locked in the Vatican archives. A note, barely legible, is scrawled on the margin of the bishop's report from the original raid, and signed, unexplained, just 3 words. Today, the monastery grounds are protected by the state. Excavations are strictly forbidden without government supervision, but this has not stopped people from trying. An anonymous drone operator managed to film the ruins at night. The midnight footage captured a figure kneeling alone before the altar. It did not move. By morning, the video had vanished. Locals whisper that the girls' souls still roam the forest, silent and lost. Others believe their souls are trapped in the catacombs of the convent, bound by the prayers they were not allowed to finish. And in the darkest hours, when the wind stops and the world holds its breath, they say you can still hear it, a voice echoing among the stones. Let the innocent suffer. Let their pain cleanse the world. Whether it is the wind, memory, or something worse, no one dares to answer.